Y'all gotta start making this harder. Considering that this is probably my 50th time responding to this talking point, I'm about to eat through your shit with maximum efficiency. Level 1, let me give you an analogy. Let's say me and you are running in a race. While we're running in said race, I'm simultaneously shooting you in the leg, all but ensuring you won't catch up to me. Not only this, you can't really even start the race until I release you from the starting line, or if you risk making a dangerous escape from the starting line when I'm not paying attention. And oh yeah, I forgot, I control this race, so even if you do make it off the starting line, I'll be making rules that ensure that you don't catch up to me. Now let's say, 99.5% of the time, I'm the one who's doing the shooting of the legs. But some of your teammates have made it off the starting line either through me releasing them or them escaping. And after managing to dodge some of the bullets, they decide, hey, I want to do some leg shooting too. So then let's say about 0.5% of the time, one of your teammates ends up shooting you in the leg. Would I then be some enlightened genius to look you dead in your face and go, huh, cat's got your tongue? What's your excuse? Your teammate also shot you in the leg. For those participating at home, the correct answer was no, because not only does whoever shot you not change the effects of getting shot in the leg, we're still running on my game by my rules, and I was the one shooting you 99.5% of the time. So no shit, I would have benefits considering it's my game and I was the one doing the shooting of you. And you, no matter whether it was me 99.5% of the time or your teammate 0.5% of the time, still have to live with the effects of being shot in the damn leg. But JJ, why does this analogy matter? When you realize that in 1830, black people owned just under 13,000 of the over 2 million slaves in the US. Or, a whopping 0.6%. And even if I take the high estimate of 20,000 slaves owned by black people by 1860, out of the 3.9 million slaves in the country, that's still a whopping 0.5%. Meaning the vast majority of the time, white people were doing the shooting, if you will. Level 2, you casually forgot about Jim Crow sharecropping or the rules, if you will. Level 3, the color of the person who owns you, or shot you in this case, doesn't change the fact that being shot in the leg greatly hinders your ability to run. And level 4, all this information is talking about freed African Americans who owned black slaves. Freed from what? It's almost as if the systems of this race or, country was built against you and your teammates. I didn't even want to talk for this long, but it's amazing how much stupidity you can unleash in 13 seconds.
I'm not surprised that people say that they prefer Ukrainian refugees to Afghans. As a black person, as an immigrant, I'm not surprised when people show their prejudices. What I am surprised is how freely people are vocalizing it. From the highest to the lowest, people are saying that they prefer Ukrainians because they're white and because they're Christian. Which means that the fraying public discourse is at the point where it's almost unsalvageable. And I know that too much is put on politeness, and that polite racism is still racism. Polite xenophobia is still xenophobia. However, I think it has been a benefit for all of those of us with marginalized intersections that society, until very recently, has shunned people that within this public sphere expressed their prejudices in a really violent manner. Because while the attacks took the form of microaggressions, they weren't open aggressions. And I think now we're in a space in which we're going to have both. And that saps the energy to be able to fight the core institutional issues.
So Pops, you're a black man. Because of you, I'm a black man. So, half and half. So, if I painted my face black, would that be blackface? And if it was blackface being a hate crime, would that be a black-on-black crime?
Let me tell you why.
Why?
If you painted your face black, it would be the completion of a process. And it would be disrespectful to your mother, or you would be eliminating her.
It's not my fault you ran out of toner when I was born.
Well,
You koala printer?
perhaps we should have tried to do it.
Pops takes another day.
The best advice for women in business. Get your fucking ass up and work. It seems like nobody wants to work these days. You have to.
I know that Kim is going through a lot in the media at the moment, so I'm going to afford as much grace as I can muster. All this girl bossy takes about, just get your ass up and work. People don't want to work hard these days. Women in business don't want to work hard. Women have been working hard. Women have been working hard for centuries in the face of violence. Constant male violence, they've continued to work, right? And so if we've now experience a panoramic, a panda bear, a panna cotta, and people are re-establishing the boundaries for themselves and how much energy they are willing to exert in a society that does not give them equal and proportionate remuneration, as in they don't pay them well, why would you think that they'd want to continue doing that particular thing? People are tired, Kim. People are dying, Kim. Get all of this through your head. It's not that hard to understand. Like, the people that work hardest in our capitalist society usually get paid the least. The black women that you and your sisters, the clowns of Calabasas, you and your sisters, the black women that you've carved your identities out of, have they been remunerated? Have they been paid for, being the smartest people in the room that's allowed you to create these identities that you trot about everywhere? Probably not. Probably not. So when you are giving this advice that you want people to take on, consider yourself. Be self-aware. Be aware of yourself and stop the...
I'm beyond sick of white women on the internet and in person making a performance out of Asian women's sexuality. And not just Asian women, almost all women of color experience this leechery, but that's not what I'm talking about today. So what do I mean? Because you've seen it. And please bear with me, because this is not just about makeup, and I know you guys lose all critical thinking when it is not solely about makeup and appearance. It's damn near every e-girl on this app with a pink headset sexualizing herself on OnlyFans in a Japanese schoolgirl outfit or in other cosplays. And this isn't just a one-off, this is a phenomenon on the internet perhaps sparked by Belle Delphine. I'll call it the Belle Delphine effect. White women get to play dress up, infantilize themselves for money, for a profit, and in the same breath will say, stop Asian hate, so they don't receive backlash, while they are continuously feeding into every stereotype that gets real Asian women killed. And it gets worse, because you guys took this race baiting situation, ran with it, and then proceeded to accuse only black women of this, when they were usually just liking K-pop, or like wearing J-fashion. My mutuals have been attacked for wearing J-fashion. The directed anger towards people who are not perpetuating harmful stereotypes or literally anything was ridiculous to me. This displaced criticism needs to go towards people who are actively harming us. And the ones that do get called out return to the same bullshit because they have a following. I'm sick of it. I'm so sick.
The N-word is just as bad as the word cracker.
Here we go.
And I'm going to explain to you why before you get into a big frenzy.
Before you do, let's clear one thing up and get this out of the way now.
If you're comparing the badness of two words and you won't even say one of them, that's the worst word.
As we are aware, the N-word was used to dehumanize and demoralize black people for many, many years.
Demoralizing and dehumanizing is a great start to your list, but you skipped over enslaving, kidnapping, lynching, beating, etc. But continue.
It was also used to generalize black people so that they would not be called by their name.
The fact that you said their name lets me know that you don't even understand the history you're trying to speak on. When black people were kidnapped and enslaved, their names were stripped from them and a new name was assigned to them. You know what also was stripped from them? Their culture, their religion, their history, their traditions, their families. So no, the N-word wasn't so they didn't have to call them by their name. Their name was stolen from them. The N-word was to degrade.
We all agree that it's a despicable word and nobody should be using it.
Paul, you see where you say nobody should be using it? That's a dog whistle to a white supremacy talking point that black people shouldn't be using it. As long as they are, we can too. That's why you slid that in there. You see, white people don't get to dictate whether or not black people get to use a word that's been used historically by your own admission to degrade, demoralize, dehumanize, enslave, kidnap, murder, and lynch them. But continue.
The word cracker can be founded in many different areas and many different places throughout history. But the reason that black people called white slave owners this was because they would crack their whip.
That awkward moment where you walk face first into the point and miss it. You just admitted that the N-word is a word based solely on racism, a word used to dehumanize people, no other reason. But that cracker was a word based on the actions of white people. In other words, it was founded in reality. So you see, a word that was specifically designed to demoralize, dehumanize, enslave, kidnap, lynch, and beat people versus a word that was used to describe actual actions taken by a people are not the same.
Calling somebody a cracker means that you're calling somebody a slave owner, which is the most despicable, low-life type of person that you could possibly be.
You see, it's funny you bring up that slave owners is the most despicable thing you could be, but yet people like you fight to prevent actual history from being taught in school. You prefer the whitewashed version. It's funny that whenever we talk about the Revolutionary War, so many white people talk about my grandfather fought the Revolutionary War. I trace my family line back to the Revolutionary War. But anytime we talk about slavery, well, nobody I know owned a slave. My family's been poor. Only rich people own slaves. You always distance yourself from slavery and tie yourself to revolutionary. So if you truly believe that slave owners are the worst thing you can be called, then teach our children about slavery. Continue.
This is the reason why both of these words are equally derogatory.
And now I hope you know why you're wrong. You're dismissed.
I'm just using this comment to show just how close slavery is to us. Just how close slavery is to the white community specifically. That y'all know people, that there are living white people who have talked to slave owners. Living white people who were birthed by slave owners. White people aren't just necessarily descendants of these slave owners, right? Of these really racist people who put in the institutions that are marginalizing black people to this day. Y'all were birthed by slave owners. Some of y'all were birthed by KKK members. Some of y'all were birthed by people who lynched black people. It's not far removed from y'all at all. It's quite literally in your households. Yet some white people, not surprising to me, and I'm sure other black people said, oh, I'd never considered or thought about asking my white family members what their role was back in the day during racism. That's because white supremacy told y'all that it's not the white community's history. That racism and slavery and Jim Crow and lynching was only something that happened to black people. Just happened to black people. That's black people's history. We're not going to talk about the other part. We're not going to talk about the other side. But it is your history. And it's your current. Because as long as these people are still alive, people who saw their dads lynch people, who went to host lynchings, who bullied black people for going to school, as long as those people are still alive, it is your current. It's not just your history. That shit, those people is eating Thanksgiving with you. Those people are opening Christmas presents with you. But none of that is new to black people. I really need y'all to get, I need that to be understood. I spent Thanksgiving with a woman who's picked cotton in the 40s. We've spent holidays with people, barbecues, cookouts with people who were born on plantations. We've opened presents with people who are beat up for going to integrated school while black. So I'm glad this is sparking conversations and realizations. And to the white people who are like, oh, my grandparents are dead, your living family members probably know more than you think. And to the white people who are like, oh, well, my ancestors were immigrants, back in the 40s, 20s, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't mean they weren't racist. Doesn't mean they weren't racist where they were at. And it doesn't mean they didn't enact racism when they came here. So I'd still ask.
Maybe it's men's turn to start adapting their behaviors, not only to make feminine presenting people feel more safe, but to make them actually safe.
When I was a kid, my sister, she's the oldest, when she started liking boys, I remember my mother, my grandmother, everybody, all the adults, started giving her advice about things that she could try to do to keep herself safe, unmolested, and alive while dating. And for the boys in the family, the dating conversation was pretty simple. Go get them. Make sure you make some money so you can buy them stuff. Let me show you something. On Reddit, there are discussion boards. They're called subreddits. Here's a subreddit designed for women to talk to each other about women things. These are the hottest topics of today. Being 16 years old and feeling weird about a 23-year-old man coming on to them. Being sexually assaulted by a friend's boyfriend. Being physically hurt during sex and having their consent breached and why that isn't funny. Tired of being told that having their gender represented in media isn't important. Getting sexually assaulted by a man at work. Getting advice after being sexually assaulted by their own husband. I'm a very objective person. I look at data, and I've found that the easiest way to find out what life is actually like for a group of people is to listen to them talk to each other. The gravity of mistreatment that women have faced, and still face even now, is very clear. Here's a subreddit where men get together and talk about men things. Shaving tips. What's your favorite beverage? Do you ever get boners just from being happy? Favorite game? Many, many, many posts about the best ways to get sex. Where's the weirdest place you've ever peed? Sounds like a fairly diverse, well-rounded human experience. Now that is not to say that men have no hardships. You know what we struggle with? Desperately. Loneliness. And this is because, over time, men have alienated themselves from women because of the way they've treated women. I mean, how can anyone really be a safe space for their abuser or someone they fear? And also because we are isolated from each other due to masculinity codes that we made up. It's all there. It's not confusing. But we don't want to see it because deep down in our brains, we're afraid that seeing that and dealing with it would mean some kind of loss of power. But the truth is, having power over another human being is not empowering, actually. What's actually empowering, in my experience, is realizing that you can help people who have been put down, help each other, help ourselves in the process. That's empowering. And maybe someday we'll get it.
Individualism is an enemy to anti-racism. Let's get into it. It's frustrating to speak out about racist behaviors that I experience and about racist systems, and then I have white people in my comments talking about, I don't claim them, that's not me, some of us are different, which are all variations of not all white people, which is never helpful. These are all individualistic mindsets that empower systemic racism. Whether you are actively and intentionally pushing systemic racism forward or not, if you're white, you're automatically benefiting from these systems. All of you. It's like you're standing still, but you're on an escalator. When we as Black, Indigenous, and other people of color are telling our stories or teaching about racism, white folks, you must resist the temptation to disassociate yourself from whiteness and the harm that it causes. So when you respond in ways seeking to separate yourself from these systems of racism and white supremacy, you are prioritizing your own feelings and reputation, first of all, and you are also shedding responsibility for dismantling these harmful systems. I promise you that your effectiveness as an anti-racist will be compromised if you see this as an external problem that's perpetrated by those bad white folks over there. You must understand that although you might not have built this house of racism, you still live in it, you still get the benefits from it, and you must take ownership and responsibility for it. If you ever feel tempted to tell a Black, Indigenous, or other person of color that you are not one of those white people, don't.
So I was watching this TikTok and this woman was talking about an experiment scientists had done. Scientists had taken rats and exposed them to cherry blossoms, and every time those rats were exposed to cherry blossoms, they shocked the rats. The rats then ended up associating the cherry blossom with the shock. Then they removed the shock and just exposed the rats to the cherry blossom, right? They'd see the cherry blossom, freak out because it had once been associated with the shock, right? Here's where the experiment gets interesting. Then those rats had kids, and then those rats had kids, and then those rats had kids. They ended up having 6 generations of rats. 6 generations down the line, they exposed those rats to cherry blossoms, and those rats freaked out. Had never experienced the cherry blossom to shock association. Just when they were exposed to the cherry blossoms, they hated it. For those of you who follow me, you probably already know what I'm going to say next. Black people in America were enslaved for 400 years. Which was then followed by 100 years of overt racism, Jim Crow laws, beatings, lynchings, unfair treatment in their own country, all the while being negatively depicted in media, completely demonized. And then on top of that, wrongfully imprisoned and murdered by doctors. And then you want to get police brutality involved, but that's too much to talk about right now. Let's talk about the 400 years of slavery, which we are not quite yet 6 generations removed from. People have the audacity to look Black people in the face and say, that was so long ago. What do you mean it can affect you now? How? No one who was alive back then is even alive today. What do you mean? Reparations? Oh, you guys are just so dramatic. So not only are Black people having to work through the generational trauma that has been passed down because a lot of our families, they didn't have time to deal with it. They didn't have time to deal with their mental health. Are you kidding me? So we're barely getting to be able to deal with our mental health like today, while simultaneously being gaslit and told that it wasn't a big deal and we should just get over it, while fighting the systems that are in place, that those people from so long ago put in place and that remain in place, that white people benefit from today and Black people are disadvantaged by today. And I don't even have a positive spin to put on it at the end or something motivational or inspirational or any of that. I don't have that. It's just so much. It's a lot. And you want to know what makes it even crazier? Like the cherry on top? The descendants of the oppressors continue to play the fucking victim. It's just, I can't make this up. Like, it's just,